Right, hello, welcome everybody. My name's Helen Quarmby, and this is my lovely friend Bethan Fletcher. So this is a this is a continuation of our what we're calling a spiritual cuppa and a chat. I suppose that the term spiritual could come across, we're all spiritual but inhabiting a human body. So what some people might claim to be a spiritual journey, it's all a spiritual journey. A lot of it's about self-realization, waking up to yourself, learning about yourself and what's made you you. So not to get too tangled up in terms, but these are just our experiences in the hope that we can maybe bring some clarity for you if you're perhaps feeling more difficult times, if things are changing in your life. There's lots going on at the moment. This is 2021, so today is the 2nd of March 2021. We're all aware that there's loads gone on so far. We're all still in the midst of it, and it's bringing up all sorts of stuff. And we've been through a lot together, haven't we? And individually, Bethan.
Yes, we have.
We know how powerful our personal, not just us two, but anybody's personal story can be in shedding light on somebody else's. And that can come in many ways, can't it? It can bring clarity, understanding, feeling of that you're not on your own, it's not just me, that kind of thing. And maybe open up another avenue for somebody to seek out support, help, all of that kind of thing. So if you're here with us, whatever stage you're at, whatever point in existence you might come across this video, I was always told that even if a video or a book had been written or made years ago, if you're at that stage now, because everything's supposed to be happening now in quantum field, if you've come across this now, then take it that this is meant for you. There are no mistakes in life, are there? So we decided today that we would take a look at the subject of mother, our mums. We are both mums as well. You don't have to be a physical mum to bring in that mothering energy. It can come in all shapes and forms, but the overarching theme of mum, the mother, can bring with it all sorts of connotations, emotions, thoughts, can't it, Bethan? So
yes.
So I'm just going to sort of ask you, Bethan, about, when you think about your mum or mothering and all of that, what story does it bring to mind for you? What does it mean?
With my, like, I was born 1961, and my mother was older. She wouldn't coming up to 40 when she had me, or I was born in March and she was 40 in the August. There's quite a big gap between me and my sister, so I was the baby. So as my life from a child, I mean, it was a really happy childhood. I was, I had lots of aunties and uncles and cousins to play with and that. But for me, when you're on a journey and then you start to realize a spiritual journey or a path, and you start to realize how you react and constantly react to things, and that could be lack of confidence, it could be self-esteem. I think for me, both those, self-esteem and confidence. And mainly, and I'm not saying I blame my mother for, but it's when you get older and when you go through your path yourself, or just start to want to heal for whatever reason, or embrace a spirituality, you start to look at yourself and think, well, why am I like this? Why do I keep repeating the same things? Why why don't I rely on myself more, which I do now, but it's just as I was going on that process. And then I think it was the process really of the shamanic practitioners course we did that actually made us start to look at our ancestors, wasn't it? And that being your mother and your mother's mother, and possibly going back further, that have impacted the way we are, or the way we behave, or the way we perceive ourselves, is through we become what our mother sees, and it's trying to unravel all that and sort of step into your own boots, so to speak. And as mums, I've probably done it to my own, you know, because that's what we do. That's so this chatting about this issue and knowing with the Reiki that you can heal these feelings through your generations by one, me being aware of what's gone on, although it might be a bit late for Emma, but asking her or making her more aware, so that when her children, my grandchildren, grow up and have their family, that eventually, they say 7 generations, eventually those things that are deep rooted within, and sometimes we cannot unpick them, they keep surfacing but we're never quite sure, eventually they will be unpicked and they will be freer and more able to step in their shoes and be more creative and confident. So that's how I would say with my mum. The earliest memory for me growing up, without, because like you could talk about it for hours really, because it's like trying to condense it, especially for me. I can talk for hours about anything anyway, so just somebody asked me to talk and I'm your girl. I just think, right, so I'm conscious I won't go on too much. But my mum always, when I was growing up, I was never allowed to do anything, which sounds ridiculous, but I wasn't allowed to have a bike because the roads were too busy and I might get run over. I wasn't allowed to go far. I wasn't allowed, and then when I got older and I left school, I wasn't allowed to go on girl holidays, you know, with my friends. And then it's like that caused a really rebellious streak, really. Not that I did go off and do all the, you know, disobey my mother as such, but like it, and then I started to I got married then at 18, and I think that sort of, I just wanted to be 18 so I could get away from it and maybe start having a life. But big mistake, because I went from the fat into the fire base. That right? Fire into
the frying pan into the fire. Well, the fat in the frying pan, yeah.
It was worse. My freedom was squashed then, but and it's the anxious. My mother was very, very anxious person. And I get anxious, and I do have a fear, we all do, of something happening to our children and our loved ones. But to not be able to leave them go, that is when problems start. We've all got that fear, but not to leave them go is hard, because it does imprint the self-esteem and self-confidence issues then.
Yeah.
And naivety, actually. Naivety is a big thing, because you're so protected from the world as such. You don't become streetwise, really. Mm. So you leave yourself open to other influences. Yeah. But my mum, as a little girl, going through the shamanic training and looking at ancestors and seeing that shadow side, you know, the inside, the things that crop up and the same feelings that crop up. And it's then understanding, which I never have before, where my mother came from. And when I stopped and actually looked at her life, like she was one of 9 children, 4 which died, 3 were stillborn, and 1 at 2, she was the older sister, had fallen, I'm going maybe about 1928, 1927, where they used to boil clothes in the backyard. And I don't know what happened, but he ended up falling in this boiling water. And my grandmother obviously sat with him all day because we didn't have the hospitals, or they couldn't afford, or whatever. So he died. And so that for my grandmother must have been an absolute horrendous thing to go through for hours. Mm-hmm. And my mum witnessing that as a child. Yeah. And then just as my grandmother was obviously worried then about the rest of the children, where they were going. So all this must have made a massive mental imprint on my mum. And then when she had my sister, because there's 10.5 years between me and my sister, when my sister was 8, she went to meet my grandfather off the bus. The bus stop was opposite, and she was waiting for him to get off the bus. And of course, she ran across the road and got knocked down by a car. And my mum said she could hear the thud and the screech of brakes, and she just knew. She said in her head, she just knew. And she ran out, and of course, my sister obviously was unconscious, and she'd broke her femur, and because she'd fallen on her face looked badly marked. And my grandfather as well was really, it must have been an awful shock for him, because he witnessed it. So that must have been awful. So it was the thing then. I think she must have thought, well, if anything had happened to Sue, because I always used to joke with her, I knew I were always an afterthought. She couldn't be so silly, which I knew I wasn't. But I think she realised that she wouldn't have anyone else then. So then they had me 2 years later, which was nearly 40. So I was brought up with this fear, and I could, not being allowed to do this, and not being allowed to, certainly not riding a bike because of the road. And obviously my sister was a child of the 50s, and my mother being the older mum, I was brought up very similar to a child of the 50s. So I was quite an old-fashioned. I know the 60s were, but the 60s was starting to open up, but I was a bit later to that. Yeah. So it's only through this journey that I've actually sat back and thought, I completely get my mum's deep-rooted fears, which could have started with her brother Vernon and the horror of that day. Yeah. That etched that memory, in her mind, that made her put all this anxiety and fear that something was going to happen to me. Yeah. Just, even if I just disappeared out of her sight for a second.
Yeah, panic would start to set in.
Yes. So growing up with that, and when I was 16 and started courting and got married at 18 and was glad to get married, that was bad for my mother as well, because she spent the whole wedding actually crying. It's getting married. It's just a nightmare. Because even the vicar said, I thought this was supposed to be a happy occasion. But yes, so So that's imprinted on me, like no confidence in myself, because I was never allowed to experience life.
Yes.
And I've carried that,
Yeah.
you know.
And I suppose your mum also as a child had been witness to, did you say some brothers and some other siblings had died?
Yes.
So that was a constant theme, isn't there, of loss of somebody as well, even before you came. So there was a great deal of energy dumped on your shoulders, wasn't there?
Yeah, yes. And you can understand then why, you know, why she was like that. And really, when you remove all those bad things, how strong they were.
Yeah.
And that's then when we need to think that the power is within.
Yes.
And we can overcome anything, because although they had all those fears, or my mum and my grandmother had all those fears, they were still strong women, because they carried on living their life and to deal with what they dealt with, and you know, being in the Second World War as well, and my grandmother the First World War, and losing a brother. You think no wonder they were my mum were like she was, when my father was like a bit more laid back.
Yeah.
You know, she'd be right. It's like,
yeah.
No, she won't. and that affected me as a child, a little one, because I remember going to Swansea, some new shoes, and my dad coming with us on the bus, and my mum wanted to go and pick material because she used to do a lot of sewing, and she asked my dad to watch me so she could go and choose this material in peace. And I literally screamed because she'd left me outside with my father. And my mother said, I could hear you screaming from outside. My father tried walking me around the block. You swear somebody was kidnapping me. And my dad was the most loveliest, gentlest man you could ever to me. But he implanted that fear in me so much.
Yeah.
My uncle was the only one who had a car. Well, my uncles always had cars, but the one that lived really near us, and my cousins used to go to the same school, he went to pick his boys up from school and thought, oh, I'll wait for Bethan and drop her off. I wouldn't get in the car. He come to pick me up. I don't know. I said, Bethan, it's Uncle Age, you can get in the car. No, Mum said I can't get in the car with anyone. Yeah, but you know me.
You took it to the nth degree.
He followed me home in the car, stopped the car and said to me mum, said I offered her a lift, but she wouldn't get in the car because she said you weren't allowing her to get in the car. And then it was like, you stupid girl.
So you've been
why
told
did you get in the car?
You've been told, conflicting messages. Gosh.
Mixed messages. So that's how my mum was. And then you can understand why they are the way with you, and I can understand why my anxiety have gone on to Emma in a lot of ways in the early start, because my marriage wasn't very good, you know, from the minute we had Emma. So so it just follows on then, you know.
Yeah. It is all energy, isn't it? Because maybe, you know, before I started to sort of investigate sort of the deeper aspects of ourselves, you know, and energy, I might not have understood truly why or how the mechanism of how that gets passed on to us, but it is like a negative energy that gets implanted in us, isn't it, almost? It's learned, you know, learned behaviours, learned ways of thinking and feeling and emotions, and they just got to sort of get reborn in each of us, don't they, in a way?
And I think that's exactly the sort of thing that happens is that you do all those fears your mum had and all the way your mother didn't want you to be, you sort of had those certain traits because you were really stepping into that mould of that she was creating for you, unknowingly, obviously.
So how have you in coming to realise that and sort of unpick a lot of that, how has that influenced you now? How has it helped you, or how do you think it's going to help how you live your life sort of from now on?
I think it's helped me realise that you can, and this didn't come till later in life. This didn't happen in my 20s, 30s. Maybe it was creeping in the 40s where I started to feel my own power and that I could think for myself, and I was seeing situations differently, you know, in the family arena, you know. I was completely different to the way I was handling issues that were arising in the family as such. And although that feeling of guilt as well, I don't know if many, I bet there's a few of us, I don't know if you've had that, but guilt and you haven't done anything. You know, that deep rooted guilt. Why? What is that? And that is one I'm still battling with, because I can feel guilty for anything. I haven't even done anything, and I don't know why. You know, I always think, is it my fault? You know, is it something I said? Have I upset somebody? Or
or is it something I could have done that
yes,
to help? Or
yes, but I am learning to. I am understanding now that people obviously make their own choices, and if I did say something, you know, that I didn't mean to say or was misconstrued, that really wasn't my fault. It's their issue, and I don't mean their issues, and I don't care, but it's their issue, as in whatever's going on in it, exactly the same as me, whatever turmoil they feel or their ancestral imprints are, or whichever way they've reacted, isn't personally my fault. And I am beginning to detach. It's taken me like all the best part of 50 odd years to get to this. And I certainly hope with this new energy now and this new age that women after me or younger than me will be able to, and it will because things are speeding up, will be able to understand these feelings quickly and better, and you learn to deal with them, and you use tools that you, like for me, it's the main thing for me was doing the yoga and the meditation and the consistency of that, the focus, give me that self-esteem and confidence to understand the bigger picture, I think, along with the Reiki and then shamanic work.
And so you mentioned a minute or two ago about power, realizing that, you know, we have our own power. Can you sort of shed a light on that? If somebody's not really getting what that is, what does that look like? What it was look like in you? What's your understanding of it? You know, how do we lose our power? What does it mean?
For me, it's self-belief. It's that self-belief because you've always trusted everybody else or doubted yourself, and then all of a sudden you start to believe in yourself and you start to feel I can't say self-love because that's a difficult one for people, that could be a whole new YouTube video on that one, couldn't it? But it's like self-belief and trust that trust is inside, you know, that gut feeling, that energy that's inside, that voice that tells you you're thinking one thing, but you know something down here is telling you something different. And that is the one you start to trust. And once you start to trust that, the self-belief, then you start to step into your own, I'll say your own power, who you really are, and not being ashamed of who you really are. You know, faults and all, we've all got faults, nobody's perfect. And we won't get on with everyone, and not everyone will like us. And that was another issue, was wanting everybody to fit in and everybody to like me. But that is another area as well that could come from other things.
It's potentially huge, isn't it? Because that one phrase, our power, you've sort of hit that on the head there, that it's sort of made up of all sorts of things. It's like self-love and self-care, self-belief, trusting your gut. But it's also, like what you said, it's realising that part of that is boundaries.
Yes.
When you're trusting that feeling inside of you, knowing that not everybody's going to get on with you, and that's fine, because we trigger one another, don't we? It's that, to me, it's like, when people started talking about the goddess energy, it's almost that can come across as a hierarchical thing, can't it? One's better than the other. For me, my understanding is different, in that we're all gods and goddesses kind of thing. The energy of that is really knowing who you are, our own unique gifts, and that we've got the dark and the light within us. But then to look at somebody and be with somebody else and seeing their power in them as well. And allowing that person to be, and it's for each of us all to develop that connection, so that we understand what it is we're feeling or hearing internally, you know.
Because was your relationship, how was your relationship with your mum?
I think it wasn't that dissimilar to yours, in that my mum had great anxiety issues. But I know sort of when we were talking about what we were going to chat about here, the greatest clarity moment of realising who mum had been came after she died, and we were sorting through her belongings. And we found some photographs of her that I'd naturally, I can't ever remember having looked at. And it sort of shook me, really, because in looking at those photographs, they were depicting mum and two of her closest friends. Not that long after the war, the Second World War, having travelled by themselves in a car. So this is three young women, and they're gone to places like Switzerland and Austria. And now, I'm rubbish at reading a map. So, even local areas, I've to have my sat nav. I need to make sure I've got my breakdown service. I need to make sure I've got my mobile phone with me. Here were three women who later in their life, particularly my mum, was possibly, and I was guilty of this, of seeing my mum as something, the energy that the place that she got to in life portrayed for me, and this, I hadn't understood this, but this is young Helen, how I was seeing that was what it was to be a mum and a wife at that stage, and a housewife meant giving away your power completely. Because in that moment I'd realised what an adventurer she was, how brave she was and courageous. She was an explorer, She had great friends,
Yeah.
and it was a dawning. It was a little bit sad, really, and it was like, oh my God, I wish I'd have seen my mum through different eyes. But for me, her power is what she'd given away, because she got to the stage whereby everything that brought joy to her, or a lot of what brought joy, though she fiercely loved family, it was almost as if she gave away all. She had no boundaries, you know. She didn't know when to stop giving of herself.
Yeah.
It was almost like, for her to be a mum and a wife meant that she gave everything away of herself. She didn't know how to bring in self-care, and you know, everything was given to others. So that had a real impact on me, and it wasn't until the last few years when I started to go down, you know, looking at me and my life and unpicking things,
Yeah.
that I had brought more clarity to that. And I suppose, thinking about it, it brings me, you know, you started off at the beginning, Beth, saying, how far back does it go? When we talk about, you know, this divine feminine energy coming through, it can go back to the beginning of time, can't it, almost? That there are individual events like your mum seeing, you know, the little boy dying,
Yeah.
what a huge trauma that is, and then siblings dying, but also the relationship of what we call patriarchy, you know, women not having a voice over centuries.
Yes.
That has its influence as well, doesn't it? And it is said that the divine feminine energy, and a feminine energy, you don't have to be a woman just to have the feminine energy in you. It's bringing a balance to it, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
It's about bringing balance back to that. So it's looking at, you know, how can we bring in that self-love and self-care, looking at, well, what are our boundaries? You know, filling your own cup up and just giving. You know, you don't give out unless you're feeling
Yes.
full yourself, you know, because otherwise you just deplete your energy. And that was something I saw of my mum. She'd nothing left to give, but she just carried on giving. But yet she still maintained, a bit like you, that sense of humour, that spark within her. So yeah, I suppose there was a sadness with me that overcame me in looking at those photographs and thinking, oh, Mum, you know, that part of her life, she could have redress the balance. But if, depending on whether you believe in past lives or not, you know, does one life make you practice one aspect of life more than the other, and then there's another life, you know? That's the great mystery in life, maybe.
I'm listening to say that, like with my mum, because there was 10.5 years between her and her younger sister, my aunt, who died last year. And so there were 5 of them all together, my mother and her sister and 3 brothers. And then my mum went off to the Second World War. She was in the WAFs, and she met my father through that, because he was from Lancashire. And when she met my dad, and then all of a sudden she had this freedom, because she always was looking after my aunt as a little girl. It was always my mum would put her to bed, only because my grandmother had a younger one and a baby and then whatever. So my mother's freedom was quite restricted, and poverty wise they were poor, as in like not loads of money, and really not loads of money. But then by the time my auntie, that decade completely changed, where my aunt had everything, you know. She had this beautiful white wedding, and she you know, she's been the confident one. She's the one that's travelled, where my mum always felt she had to please her mum. And she, even though when she came home and the war finished, it was assumed she'd get married to my dad. And obviously she loved me dad, but I don't think she wanted to, because I think she'd had this taste of being with girlfriends, and albeit the war, she'd enjoyed that freedom, you know. And I don't think she was quite ready, but things overtook. And like your mum, you were saying that with your mum, with like you give away your power and you fall into what's expected of you, don't you? And you go with that.
Yeah, expectations is a big one, isn't it?
It is. And this is why us now moving forward can step out of that expectation and think, no, that isn't for me, you know. And that's when you coming in with the boundaries. This is where we understand our boundaries and what's right for us and what is wrong with us, rather than do the expected thing. Yeah.
So I suppose it's a little bit, might sound a bit cheesy, it's like relearning what it is to be a woman, you know. You know, they used to learn etiquette, didn't they, you know. But it's like, it's in a way you could set up a finishing school for young women to know who they are, you know, to learn about what does it mean to be you, what is the real you and what isn't you, you know, what have we. That's a massive thing, isn't it? What's really yours, which is like you're saying, the power, your intuition, learning what you really love to do or be, what do you do naturally, and what is it that you've actually taken on as part of your condition, you know, with your parents, people around you, education and schooling and everything, that we've had to do for whatever reason, or we felt we've had to do or needed to do, you know?
Yes. And I think that's why I think with this new age, and it's the age of creativity, and it's realizing that we can create, not only be more creative as in writing or painting or knitting or sewing or whatever, but creating our own future that we, you know. And then with that creation of going with who you truly are, you attract what you need. So the right people come your way, the right partner comes your way, the same level of like intellect comes your way, you know, where you're this is why I was reading about this the other day. This is why when we've crossed over from the Piscean age to the Aquarius age, the Piscean age was very like women were you know, the wolf whistles and all that in the 60s and 70s. You know, we were an object. A lot, weren't we? And we lived up to that object because that's what we perceived our role to be. And not all of us, thank goodness. I understand the women's liberation movement now that's sprung up. I think, I'd have joined that if I'd found my self-esteem and power. Off with that in the 70s. So I sort of so you've got I forgot what I was saying now. So I was saying about the Piscean and the Aquarian age. Well, the Aquarian age is that equal, where men you saw us as sex objects, and women that to be in the house and to raise children, and those were women things, and that's what we did. Where now we come together like males, females, male and female, on an even an even keel now, that the intelligence, the intelligence is there, the connection. Men are starting to step or will more into the feminine.
Yeah.
And there'll be that mutual respect,
Yeah.
where there wasn't in the last age. And although it might take a couple of decades to get there, but that's where we're going. And it's understanding the past to move on in the future, really, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think we're seeing that, you know, because we're like seeing lots of men's groups being set up, aren't we? You know, where they're allowed to talk as it really is, and not the stereotypical in the pub with the pint, you know, it's all macho stuff. Oh, get it down your neck, you know, and you're not a man if you haven't got a pint in your hand, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or open-heartedness, but with that comes a lot of shedding, and I think there's a lot of emotional turmoil that can go on, can't there? But you know, if a man or a young man or a boy isn't resonating with that more stereotypical ancient, you know, archaic kind of the masculine version, the man up kind of thing, you know, it's it can, you know, we are seeing a lot of suicide in men, aren't we? Because they're not felt able to access help to help them to understand that transition. You know, but so yeah, it's quite revealing times, but challenging times on many levels. It's not always an easy transition, is it, from one age to another?
No, it's not easy, and things aren't going to sort of happen overnight, are they? You know, they'll speed up, but they're not just not going to happen overnight. And our transformation, you know, as we said in the past, like my transition has been longer than your transition, and whoever crosses our path or comes in, you know, to understand this will zoom along quicker again, because that's the sign of the times. That's where we are. It's
it is,
and it's nice as well, and it's finding that compassion. And I think this is the key to understanding the past, because then you find the compassion for yourself. You can understand your parents, you can understand the times you were growing up in, you understand why men acted the way they did. So you get this, we will get this universal compassion and understanding that everybody has had stuff. Everybody has, we're evolving into, thankfully, a better place to live with each other, and more tolerant and compassion. Definitely,
and forgiveness.
Because if we don't forgive whatever, then we still hold a relationship with that issue, and it's still there, isn't it? We still, you're not letting it go. You know, to move forward, you need to let it go. And I was reading something which really appealed. It's funny how things come across. You come across things, and there is no such thing as coincidence. So just to say it quickly now, but which is the way I've been feeling myself. You know, like when your head's in a clutter. And then yesterday morning, I had an email, and it was called the empty bowl syndrome, and it was like a blog, and it was about like if it's about keeping your life so busy, like some people are, and this lockdown have made people stop and think now. As giving them this empty bowl so they can see what's going on. Because before, but although, like you had, you try to cram everything in because we need to keep that bowl full. Well, we don't, because if we don't have an empty bowl, then it can't keep being filled. You know, if we keep it cluttered with all these thoughts and stuff, then how can we be open to new things when we still got this bowl full of stuff we don't need? And I thought that was quite a poignant moment for me yesterday when I was reading it, and I thought, and apparently it's a Buddhist, there's a meditation with the Buddhist called the empty bowl. That's what this Buddhist called it, and it's about just letting things go, forgiving, letting things go. It made a lot of sense.
Like having a fresh start, isn't it, really?
Yes. And then obviously you're seeing things that are working for you, things that aren't working for you. And as we get more confident and more into our you know, our boundaries and that, then you let them go and think, well, hang on a sec, that ain't working for me. It goes. So you've left that space then for something new.
That's right.
And energize you and
that's
you.
lovely.
So.
Oh, that's lovely. Thanks, Beth. That's a nice note to finish on.
I don't know. It is a nice one. It made me think. So every day now. Well, funny enough, I woke up this morning before we finished. I woke up this morning and I thought, I was having a cup of tea and thinking, right, have I emptied my bowl? I should have a little look into that later and see if there's anything you chuck it out, ready to work.
That might be a nice subject for next time, because I was trying to, when you brought up something before, it's like, you know, negative self-talk, and you know, Eckhart Tolle talks about the present moment. As well, so that might be something that we have a chat about next time.
That'll be lovely.
What comes up.
Well, we're just going with this, aren't we? So
going with the flow.
We're just going with the flow.
So thanks, Bethan. Until next time, I look forward to having another cuppa and a chat, a spiritual cuppa and chat with you. And thank you to anybody that's joined us. If you feel like you want to do, please give us a thumbs up, a like, even comment, you know, add any comments. It's not about bolstering our ego, but apparently if you give us a like, then it helps it sort of shares the video to more people get to see it, and we're all, you know, if we're here to help others, then that's only a good thing. So until next time, thank you for watching, hope it helps, and take care. Bye.